He was working long weeks at a good rate of pay, and he made a lot of money.
Yeah.
We got by shorthanded, we kept him. That person is an experienced snowplow driver, and his experience is helping us out right now.
Right.
So we didn't lose him. So he was thankful for the opportunity and thanked us. So I think that worked out successfully, but I guess we could have got in trouble. I mean, I can imagine things could have gone wrong one way or another, but it worked out good.
I guess I'd like to see, or not see, I'd request maybe that you speak to the department heads, or if you haven't, maybe you already have, about in their particular areas, do they see that this would be a hardship for them, or it was something that they could handle? So that maybe you know ahead of time that there are 4 areas that we just can't do without hiring somebody else to take their place, or maybe there are no areas where we, I just don't know the scenarios.
That's what I'd expect to hear. Some it'd be easy, and some it wouldn't be at all.
And I guess just that you have the sense of where we stand with the fire department versus the police department versus others, and how big of a pool of people would this be? So it's not always, and we could even come up with the idea that some departments would not be eligible to do this, and I'll just pick the fire department off the top of my head because he's right here. There's just no way we can have anybody not pull their full shift or whatever it is they have, because we'd be short-staffed and it's too hard to get somebody to replace them. So if somebody did request, we might have 4 or 5 of these areas that we just can't do it, and we might have 2 or 3 where we can. And I don't know what that might be, but I guess we should have that discussion before we start it, rather than after we do this and then say, oh, well, yeah, we have to start fine-tuning it. So, I guess, I don't know when we need to make an action on this, but I guess I just like to make sure that we have touched all bases before we jump into it.
Mhm.
And I think this gives an opportunity for cross-training sometimes too, like, our auditor a few years ago said that our financial manager didn't have much for backup. And now that's been taken care of, and if he was gone 1 day a week, that person would probably get more training, because you'd have to fill in for him 1 day a week rather than once in a great while. So, I think there's opportunities there that are worth looking at.
Mhm. Okay, that's good discussion, thank you.
All set on that? Next item is to discuss seeking legal guidance for a TIF, for the new natural gas main.
Yeah, we had talked about this in a preliminary way, in an earlier meeting, and I got to participate at a session and included in your materials a handout from the session on tax increment financing. It's a subject that gets technical pretty fast, but the idea is to well, there are a couple of ideas, and Byron and I have been representing Oakland at a couple of meetings. I'm giving you some minutes later on in the agenda materials on what this regional committee is looking at with regards to a TIF for the natural gas project revenues. And I can tell you a couple of things. The tax increment is the amount of extra value that comes to the community from the construction of the project. And that property tax revenue on the new valuation is what we're talking about. And it's not yet computed, but all the assessors are going to try to assess the property using a similar methodology so that the communities are sort of put together on how they assess the property. And then this community-wide area discussion is trying to determine whether or not there's a way to direct the growth of the system through talking to Summit in some kind of a joint way, whether the monies can be used to incent more customers, whether the monies can be used for a variety of purposes that the state of Maine passes its approval on. The TIF has to be approved by the state of Maine in order to become official, and they have criteria that they utilize to determine what they'll allow you to use TIF money for in return for sheltering it from the loss of other state monies as a result of the new valuation. So in order to set one of these things up, there's a lot of legal speak that needs to be considered, and decisions have to be made with regards to how many years, to what purposes are you going to identify in an application to the state. Certain things are allowed, certain things are not allowed. In the memo that I gave you, I tried to list some of the things that have been discussed in my presence as possible uses for TIF monies, including, and some of these ideas, most of these ideas are not original with me, but from various sources, whether a portion of the administrative salaries that get paid to people like Doug and I can be paid for by TIF monies to help administer the TIF program. Economic development dues that we pay to organizations like KV Cog, First Park, or Chamber of Commerce, can TIF monies go to those? You can tell that that would remove items that we have to budget for in the municipal budget cycle, so there's some benefit to the town there. First responder training and equipment that might pertain to natural gas emergency type stuff that is pertinent to the development of the natural gas main. That is something. A question is whether or not we could use TIF monies to retrofit our buildings from burning oil to burning gas. Some of these I put down with question marks because it's not clear to me whether the state would allow these things or not. Road repairs over the new gas mains. And recall that not only lay the transmission main, but we're going to have distribution lines under streets, and those will require ripping up streets. People don't like the appearance of patched streets, and the normal pavement cycle, we get around to those anyway, so can TIF monies go to those? The comprehensive plan update, that's an economic development tool. There's a possibility. Chief Coffin and I spoke very briefly about a public safety building. Is that a source of funding for a public safety building that, currently we know the need is out there, we don't have a way to pay for it. So in order to determine what the state's answer would be to those questions, I'm told by the state official, and I put a correspondence in here from Laura Santini Smith, who is the state official that receives TIF applications, that how we address these things would make a huge difference to how they're reviewed. And her strong advice was that we seek professional assistance in the development of our application. And she provided me with some attorneys that she works with, who she finds work well and successfully and hit the points and get them a good bang for our dollars, so to speak, in working through this process. Some of these questions are easy and some of them are not. There are decision points that you folks get to say yay or nay on, that she can help identify. I have included in here some contact information with a person, an attorney that I worked with at Bernstein Shore as we were working on a TIF for a Comfort Inn in Wilton. Shanna Cook Muller, who is one of the people that Laura Santini Smith says does a good job. I spoke with Shanna just to sort of start somewhere. And she is willing to come and talk with you about TIFs in TIF language, so that you know what the right questions are and have to think about what the answers ought to be for Oakland. And I recommend that we bring someone aboard to at least hear the initial spiel to determine that there's still a decision to make whether a TIF is what you want to do or not. And I think you can argue that one both ways. And she'd be good at running numbers, to show you what it would mean for Oakland if you did this or if you did that. Various periods of time. You don't have to tip the full amount of what you receive. There's a million different combinations, and I don't honestly know how to sit here and guide you through all the options, but she does this, that's pretty much what her specialty is. And if you're interested in the TIF concept, my recommendation is that we bring her in for the informational spiel and see if there's anything you want to go forward with beyond what you hear her present.
I think it'd be worthwhile
I think
to
it'd be
get some
very
more
worthwhile.
information, because this is, like you said, there's a lot to this thing.
There is.
And you explained a little bit to me one day, Peter, about the advantage of a TIF now is not quite as good as it was a few years ago when our revenue sharing was more from the state,
That is so.
and which gets kind of complicated for me.
The benefit is diminished when the monies you're talking about are smaller.
Right,
You know, if the state can take 20% out of $1 million, that's a lot. But if you're gonna lose 20% out of zero, that's nothing.
yeah,
And revenue sharing is shrinking to zero. So it may not be worth the bother, but she can run numbers,
right.
and I can't. But I think if we heard her, you would know whether you wanted to continue in that direction. One of the bigger questions for me is, does Oakland want to participate in this regional entity that is 2 meetings along? And again, questions are more numerous than answers. And if I give you an answer, you're probably going to come up with 2 more questions, and that's a hard one to get surrounded.
So this Laura Santani Smith would come and speak to us for free?
Well, she-
Laura-
No,
Santini,
Laura Santini Smith is the state DECD director. She's the one that receives the application and determines whether you
Mhm.
cross the Ts and dotted the Is correctly. She's the one that's recommending that we have Shauna Cook Muller, the attorney, work with us to prepare.
Okay.
The
I'm
meal
just
for
wondering if
Laura.
there's a cost for the person to come here and speak to us, to the town.
Yes, there is. And she said she can do it on an hourly basis or for a set fee to do the, what she calls TIF 101 talk.
I think it's worthwhile. Now, somewhere in this thing, Peter, you gave us some minutes from the meetings you've been attending.
Yeah,
And I
further
liked
along.
your comment that, I can't find that right now, but, we're interested, but maybe we want to keep track of our own money separately. I could see where you were going with that comment, that we don't want to get overshadowed by Waterville here on, what, you know, on our residents getting the returns from this, so I think we need to be involved in the discussions until we see how that goes, but maybe we wanna try to keep the monies more separate when the time comes or something, so,
Seems like you'd want the full benefit of the monies
Right.
that come out of Oakland.
right,
So how you would do that, working regionally, is not clear yet.
right,
But Shauna, Shauna would speak to the development of something that would, she thinks would pass muster with the state. Because these TIF applications, you've got to satisfy the state that it's fulfilling the objectives of the state law. That's what it's all about. And it's very, I'll tell you what, the things that you can put TIF monies to is an odd list of things. And I think the legislation, I put a copy of it in here for you to look at, but you'll see that it's almost an odd list. Quality childcare costs, you know, because the legislature saw fit to include that there. All these economic development things that I told you about are on the list. But then item 5 on this page 2 of 2 that also includes quality childcare costs. Now, what that has to do with some of these other economic development things is a little hard to get your head around, except the legislator thought that was important. So making sure that we are in conformance with the law is key, and it really takes someone that reads the legal stuff carefully, who puts, frankly, the best spin on Oakland's ideas to gain approval, is I think what Laura was saying you really ought to strive for.
do you have a feeling about the time? I'm thinking of the budget sessions and things, Peter. Is this something we need to do soon or later?
Well,
It seems
it's
like-
January, and I'm bringing it forward because, of course, every year, April 1, that's when the amount of property is kind of measured for what
Right.
you've got for that year. And of course, last year, we had 0 from Summit, and this year, there's gonna be a big number, and next year, there's gonna be a bigger number of
Right.
taxable property in town from these sources. So I am looking for her guidance as to just which dates you capture what and what has to happen now so that we're not behind the 8 ball. That's one of the things I'd like to hear from Shannon.
Yeah,
I think you'd be well
I
worth us
do.
having her come in.
I do.
I'll make a recommendation that Peter hires her, or the town hires her,
For the
Come in.
TIF
Yeah.
101 talk,
Yeah.
for TIF 101 talk,
okay?
you know.
If she could give us some available dates, then we could pick one of them or something.
How about if I try to get her to come for a regular council
go.
meeting night and have her, give her as much time as she needs for,
It wouldn't be that long a
I could
session,
work
so
it
that-
around, oh no, I'm thinking, 30 minutes, 45
Oh,
minutes
okay.
or something like
I
that. We
thought
could
maybe-
probably build a meeting around it and put her first on the agenda so
You,
she
you
can.
do realize who she's working with, right? I mean, this could take all day.
You make jokes and I'll make arrangements.
I think it's fine, make arrangements.
So I have a motion,
I'll second it.
all in favor? 4.
Okay, thank you.
Night, Doug.
Good night, Good night.
Thank you for your time. Item number 6 is to authorize the town manager to sign a renewal agreement with Maine Security Surveillance.
This is a standard renewal, there's nothing new about it, including the price, but I just wanted you to see that there is a fire detection system in this building. And when we have an agreement, I'd like you to know what we're agreeing to. It's a standard renewal, costs us $234 a year for the fire detection system in this building.
Is that the only one we have from, that was a question I wrote down, is that the only one they do for us?
In this building, yeah. Yeah, this is the renewal that I have.
Yeah. I didn't know if we had them for other buildings, other town buildings or not.
This is the only one that this is the only one.
The fire department uses Maine Security.
You do?
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing that paperwork come through.
But I wondered
That's
about,
separate from this one. This is the
Right, it
town
just,
office.
it goes in as a PO every year. I've never received
The
a
contract.
contract, but maybe I will be.
but I wondered if like Memorial Hall that isn't occupied all the time, or the library that has 3-day weekends, if we do anything
There's
on
a
the
different
temperature-
arrangement at the library. I don't think it's with Maine Security Surveillance. This is, well, I kind of lost track of the fact that there was one at the fire station as well as here, with this company.
Yeah. Cause that building is, Memorial Hall sits there for 4 or 5 days at a
Oh,
time. with,
we have other buildings that could probably be,
I didn't know if we had anything there that this involved, was involved with this or not.
no, this is just for the town office.
I'd make a motion to authorize the renewal and to perhaps update us at the next meeting as to
What are the
where
numbers?
we are with other facilities, and we need to look into something different for the budget.
Yeah, I'd second that.
All in
Okay.
favor?
Okay.
Manager's report.
Let me see. We talked a little bit about these minutes that I provided to you on the Municipal Natural Gas Advisory Committee. And there's a list of attendees. You can see that the representation there is from all the communities in this area that we usually talk with on things, and some other interested participants from other organizations. And the ideas, I think we've kind of talked around on what sort of regional opportunities exist, when, how much, what the uses of TIF proceeds might then be. There was a writing here from Ken Fletcher, who has a lot of experience in energy issues at the state and local level, on dividing of proceeds between incenting individuals. There was a letter, I think, that I gave you in the earlier materials from Commissioner Gervais, who said that it's okay to incent commercial customers, but not residential customers. This was one of the things that the state was gonna allow. But these discussions anyway are about how much of what proceeds would go in what direction, and I think the arguments could become endless with regards to, you know, are we gonna put them towards energy efficiency improvements for people perhaps not served by gas?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of policy questions that will need to be answered. It seemed like there were a couple of ideas. One was that the TIF monies could be loaned on a revolving loan fee, so that as the monies get repaid, that someone else could do a project with the same monies the second time around. So that suggested that there had to be sort of a science committee to determine what improvements you could do, and then a finance committee to determine who's likely to repay the loan, which loans are approved or not. So we're sort of brainstorming, and I think 2 meetings have got us into it, but we certainly aren't through it. And I don't know how many more meetings there are, need to be. There is another meeting scheduled on the 22nd of January that I'll be at, and I hope Byron will be at. But it did seem appropriate to let you see what's been discussed so far, and hopefully more will become known as this process goes forward. But I think what we learned from Shanna Muller will be useful in this context as well. So that's a report. I mean, I try to answer questions if there are any, but at least I've given you the material.
I just got one small question. Under the TIF discussion, it says Mike explained that the meeting had been planned to discuss the question of TIF adoption. Is that Mike Hevener or Mike Roy?
Mike Roy has
Okay.
has served as the chair of these meetings.
Okay.
So that is that.
When
I'm sorry?
This second part of this thing here, the letter from Ken Fletcher,
Yes.
raises a lot of questions, I think, and you know what, if you're gonna have this revolving loan fund, as to who administers it, and, the whole thing can get quite complicated if you're doing that sort of thing, and, to me, is, who decides whether your project is worthwhile or not? It seems like a lot of administration, and remember the information you gave us from this PACE thing, that was some sort of an energy revolving loan fund that somebody else ran, right?
That was federal dollars run through the state, and they needed municipal sign-off.
Right, yeah, and that was an energy conservation
Yes,
type conversions and
yes.
things like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, if you set up a loan fund, you're kind of getting in competition with all the local credit unions and banks that we have. And if you're out there convincing people to convert to natural gas and helping them do it, you're kind of going against a major taxpayer we have here in Oakland that delivers oil and takes care of oil burners. So, it raises a lot of questions, I think, that maybe, we're gonna take some discussion down the road,
I have to agree.
yeah.
Well, this was a thought piece.
Yeah.
And as you can see,
It raises a
it
lot of
poses a lot of thoughts and questions, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All set?
Yep.
There's also in your packet the requested report from Messalonsky Stream Hydro on the manipulations they did to the grading over the fall, and I think you got kind of a schedule that kind of shows when it was open and a letter that went with it. It was nice that they did provide this to us, and they removed the screens for a total of 16 days from October 17th through December 5th, and some of the times are given here. These are the sheets that came by, but at least they did try to keep some records for what they did, and I'm not remembering any complaints or anything that anybody offered to us, other than that after we had some severe storms, it looked like the water was gonna come over the top of something, but that didn't pertain directly to the fact that the grates had been removed, so. let me see, I think there are some other things that I hope made it into your packet. There's a report for the month of December from the library, detailing their activities and the number of patrons and books and things that came and went. I've given you a statement regarding a revenue sharing campaign. The MMA Executive Committee, in response to requests from a number of member communities, has determined to make an effort to reinstall municipal revenue sharing. The current legislation makes it go away unless the task force that had been set up found $40 million worth of savings in the state budget. They fell short, and it turns out that the legislature wasn't supportive of some of the items that they did identify, which meant that the revenue sharing reductions are still on the books. Municipal officials convinced the executive committee of MMA that we need to focus the legislature's attention on the importance of those funds to the things that we try to do for our citizens. And the fact that if $40 million does indeed go away, following the reductions that have already occurred, there are important things that will not happen at the municipal level, or property taxes will rise so that they can still occur. So within a fairly compressed amount of time between now and the legislature began its efforts today, and I heard at a meeting today that they hope to be out in March. We hope to have whatever impact we're going to have between now and then, and try to get them to leave what's left of municipal revenue sharing alone, or at least restored, so that we can still consider that a significant source of revenue apart from raising property taxes or cutting services that we think people expect to receive. So I wanted you to know that MMA, you'll be hearing more from MMA on municipal revenue sharing very soon. And I put in your mailboxes this afternoon a copy of a letter that came to my attention today. It's written by Kathy Littlefield, who is the chairperson of the Waldo County Municipal Association. And she wrote a letter addressed to the members of the legislature from Waldo County. And in it, she has detailed the municipal services that are mandated by the state that we will carry out. She lists the expectations that the state has of municipalities, and she then contrasts that with the taking of money that has been part of our efforts since the 1970s. And she tries to indicate, how can you ask us to do this while you are doing that, is the basic format of her letter. And she's saying you shouldn't do this. Do not leave us in this situation where you expect us to do things and take away the money that you provide to get them done. So I thought it was a very well-written letter. This would be along the lines of what I expect you to hear more from the MMA as that effort unfolds. But it was a well-written letter, and I thought you might just like to look at it at your convenience. I also placed in your box this afternoon a quarterly report from Police Chief Tracy on the operations of the police department from October to December. And I hope that you will find that newsy and full of things that you know and you hadn't heard yet. So that's there for your consideration. Those are the things that I brought to tonight's meeting, and I'd be ready to end there or entertain questions and our other business.
No questions. Mr. Bowman, do you have anything?
One interesting letter that Dennis McClellan passed on to me, and he received this letter from American Water Resources. American Water Resources is a company that is going to be sending letters to Oakland residents